pick up on that point that it is seminal in terms of the anti-colonial movement, because it inspired, Africans all over the world. And as you know, and I want you to pick up on that too, because certainly in the diaspora, the first so-called Pan-African conference or Congress was held in 1900. I think it was in London. Sylvester Williams certainly was the progenitor, and I think W.E.B. Du Bois was also there. And there's a direct relationship between 1896 and 1900. The word that spread abroad. And there's also a parallel between, the Haitian victory against enslavement in 1804 and the rebellions, etc., within the Caribbean. I think the 1804 conquest by the Haitians of Napoleon's army and the British was so inspirational and led to so many different things in terms of, for example, the Bolivarian Revolution and so on. And we'll get to that down the road. But I just want to compare and contrast those two things in terms of one being a blow against slavery, and in terms of 1896 being a blow against colonialism and giving rise to, certainly in the diaspora as well as on the continent, the anti-colonial movements and the Pan-African movements that started in 1900. Can you pick up on that, Robin?
Yes, sir. One of our colleagues, Danny Thompson, his master's thesis was about this very topic. Mm-hmm. It was about the movement that was called Ethiopianism. Mm-hmm. And this was the Black nationalist movement before Pan-Africanism was coined. And the Ethiopianists were inspired by the phrase in the book of Psalms, princes shall come out of Egypt, Ethiopia shall stretch forth her hands unto God. And of course, Ethiopia has two meanings. One of the meanings is a country in East Africa. Another meaning is the whole of Africa. Mm-hmm. And essentially, this was we wouldn't call it Pan-Africanism because the term Pan-Africanism hadn't been coined yet. But they'd be talking the same stuff that the Pan-Africanists would be talking just a little bit later. So this is the prehistory of Pan-Africanism. And it started in the African-American churches, the AME Church and the AMEZ Church, African Methodist Episcopal Church, African Episcopal Zion Church. And they were sending missionaries and representatives to Southern Africa, West Africa, the Caribbean, and the UK. And then you had these networks of people moving between Black America, the Caribbean, Africa, and England. And ultimately, it was that movement of people that created Pan-Africanism. Now, most people start Pan-Africanism with the Trinidadian barrister, Henry Sylvester Williams. And he was in London in 1896, where he was studying at Gray's Inn. But apparently, we've now found some new information, and the new information is that the idea of even creating such a movement actually started with a Black South African woman called Alice Kinloch, and she was from Cape Town. And she also had business coming to Britain. And apparently Henry Sylvester Williams wrote, and I'm quoting, "The association," meaning the African Association, "is the result of Mrs. Kinloch's work in England and the feelings that as British subjects, we ought to be heard in our own affairs." And then inspired by that, we then get the first Pan-African Congress. No, it wasn't Congress, it was conference, wasn't it? The first Pan-African Conference in 1900. And as you rightly say, you had Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois at that conference. You had Britain's leading Black composer also at that conference. That composer is our local boy. I'm right now, I'm filming this from Croydon in South London, and our local hero is Coleridge, Samuel Coleridge Taylor.
Oh yeah, great.
Yeah, and he was there, and he even wrote music for the event. And then what came out of this? You had Ethiopianist-inspired choirs. You had an Ethiopianist-inspired literature, and in every respect, the choirs, the literature, the discourse, the churches, all of it was the precursor to Pan-Africanism.
As a thank you for visiting our website, we are giving you a free copy of our exclusive 100 Black History Facts, which is in fact a taster of our course content. Make sure you leave your email address and we will send it right to you. We hope it inspires you to dig deeper into your history and heritage.
You're definitely, correct there. And as you were mentioning, Richard Allen, of the created, shall we say, the African Methodist Episcopal, Zion Church, and pulled away from the Methodist Church itself, which was white, obviously, and which would not allow them to worship with the whites. They had a separate up in the balcony for Black people, and of course they were insulted by that and separated and created a different church. And then some of the other people that you were referring to were people like Blyden and people like Robert Love, who were some were born in Africa, some were born in the Caribbean, but they went from the Caribbean to Liberia, to Sierra Leone, and to England, and some of them were missionaries, etc. So there was a whole period there, as you're mentioning, before the 1900s, when all of this was happening. And I can't remember the American who had this trip to the Congo, where he was investigating the Congo.
George Washington Williams.
Okay, there you go. Ross Worm, I think, was also one of those people. So there's a whole period there of different, the ideas were germinating in terms of African expression, coming out of the period of slavery, and how do we reconstitute ourselves, and then getting towards that 1900 conference, and then subsequent conferences leading up, of course, to 1945, which was also seminal, but also leading up to my dad, which was important. It's interesting that you mentioned the Psalm, "Princes shall come out of Egypt, and Ethiopia shall stretch forth her hands unto God." This was one of my dad's favorite quotations. And I think it's important also that you mentioned that Ethiopia is both the continent as well as the country, which ended up being called Abyssinia at one time, and then came to be called Ethiopia. I'm not sure of what the sequence was when it became Abyssinia. But I think what has happened over time is that you have some groups who identified Ethiopia with Abyssinia, meaning that the whole historicity in terms of the nation state. And of course, my dad's vision of Ethiopia was all of Africa, which is the way other people saw Africa, because Ethiopia originally, I think, meant dark skin or burnt faces, however you want to describe that. And that Ethiopia originally also was not only the continental Africa, but India. Some people called India Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Eastern Ethiopia.